We will call the Tuesday, February 23rd Planning Commission meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Changes to the agenda.
No, Chairman.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Saylor,
Here.
Vice Chairman Jacob,
Here.
Mr. Helmar,
Here.
Commissioner Garza,
Here.
Commissioner Pruitt,
Here.
Public comments under Government Code 54954.3. Members of the audience may address the commission on any item of interest to the public or on any agenda item before or during the commission's consideration of the item. State law prohibits the Planning Commission from acting on non-agenda items. Did we have any public comments?
Chairman, I do have several that have come in, but I believe they are for the public hearing.
Okay.
I do also have one person, it looks like, who has their hand raised.
Okay.
Mr. Yeager, if you'd like to go ahead and speak.
Okay, this is Johnny Garza. I am using Mr. Yeager's computer. Sorry about that. My name is Johnny Garza. I'm the Director of Student Services and Family Support here at the Coalinga Unified School District. On tonight's Coalinga Unified School District Board meeting agenda, there's a resolution that opposes the reduction in the proximity of cannabis facilities to school. I am going to read our resolution in its entirety. Whereas it's resolution number 13/20-21. And is a resolution of the Board of Trustees of Coalinga Unified School District supporting the need for maintaining the distance requirements for cannabis facilities proximities to schools. Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Coalinga Unified School District is committed to serving a diverse community of students in an inclusive, safe, and secure environment. And whereas the board is also committed to safeguarding the wellness of all students, having established policies by which staff work to ensure well-being of the students Coalinga Unified School District serves. And whereas the Planning Commission of the City of Coalinga is currently considering an amendment to reduce the distance requirement from where non-retail commercial cannabis facilities may operate in proximity to a school from 1,800 feet to 930 feet. And whereas in its clinical report entitled Counseling Parents and Teens About Marijuana Use in the Era of Legalization of Marijuana, the American Academy of Pediatrics has documented numerous public findings indicating that cannabis use has harmful effects on adolescents and youth, citing a host of recent medical and scientific research studies to evidence these claims. And whereas in this report, the American Academy of Pediatrics references longitudinal studies that link marijuana to negative effects on intellectual function and higher rates of mental health disorders such as and whereas the California Department of Public Health has cited research findings indicating that early marijuana use is associated not only with impaired school performance, but also with an increased likelihood of students dropping out of high school. And whereas Coalinga Unified School District is committed to actively supporting its students with wellness, education, and harm reduction counseling to address the harmful effects of cannabis on youth. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Coalinga Unified School District opposes any reduction of the required distance from where any cannabis facilities may operate in proximity to a school, and respectfully request that the Planning Commission of the City of Coalinga reject the proposed amendment to the ordinance so that the wellness of Coalinga and Huron youth can be protected and safeguarded. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anybody else who wants to speak on the zoning text amendment, it is a public hearing, and you will have the opportunity to do so during the said discussion of the item. Shannon, did you have anybody else with a public comment right now?
I do have a Miss Shelley Ross who has her hand raised, but I'm not sure if it's in reference to the public hearing or just a general comment.
Oh, well, I mean, she has her hand raised, so.
Let me allow her to talk and see. Miss Ross,
Yes.
did you want to speak under the public hearing, or did you have a general comment?
I thought this was the time where we talk about the amendment to the distance from the cannabis facilities. Is this now when we should talk?
Well,
Go ahead, Chairman.
since this is an agenda item, we would prefer that you speak during the actual zoning text amendment when we're having the actual discussion
Okay.
on it, which will be probably in about 10 minutes. So.
Okay,
we
so
have
I do have a letter. I just wanted to make sure it was going to be read
Yes,
tonight.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You will have the opportunity to read your letter.
Okay, you should already have it, so I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
I do
Okay.
have it, and
Perfect.
if you'd like me to read it, when the time comes, I can do that, unless you prefer to do it yourself.
You can go ahead and read it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, seeing on the screen, there doesn't appear to be anybody else with their hand raised. We're going to go ahead and move right along to the information and consent calendar. There's one item, Planning Commission recommendation to the City Council for approval of the 2020 General Plan Progress Report. If there is no need for any discussion from the commission, the chair will entertain a motion. Commissioner Helmer made the motion to approve. Does this motion have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Pruitt made the second. Everyone in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving right along to public hearings, we have one item, adoption of resolution number 021P-002. Planning Commission consideration and recommendation to the City Council for approval of a city-initiated zoning text amendment number ZTA 21-01, amending the commercial cannabis regulations related to reducing the distance requirement between schools and non-retail commercial cannabis facilities. Sean.
All right. Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm losing my track here. Here we go. Okay. So basically tonight before the commission is a recommendation that the Planning Commission adopt resolution 021P-002, recommending to the City Council approval of a city-initiated zoning text amendment amending the commercial cannabis regulations related to distance requirements between non-retail cannabis operations and schools. On January 7th, 2021, the council voted to initiate a zoning text amendment to reduce the distance requirement from 1,800 feet to 930 feet from a school as prescribed by state law and future school sites as identified in the general plan. The council's intent to reduce the distance was in an effort to increase the number of available properties within the city's MBL, that's the manufacturing business light zoned parcels, that would be eligible for non-retail commercial cannabis development. Currently, Section 9-5-128D-12 of the Planning and Zoning Code states that cannabis operations, except for storefront retail, shall comply with the distance separation requirements from schools as required by state law. Currently, a non-retail commercial cannabis operation zoned in the MBL zoning designation shall not be located within 1,800 feet from any existing school or proposed school site as identified in the general plan. Measurements shall be from property boundary to property boundary. And for the purposes of that section, school means a public or private school providing instruction in kindergarten or grades 1 through 12, inclusive, but does not include any private school in which education is primarily conducted in private homes. So just for kind of contrast, as California state regulations state that a proposed non-retail cannabis premise shall not be within 600-foot radius of the perimeter of a school providing instruction, unless another distance is established by the local jurisdiction, which currently the city has set it at 1,800 feet. So the proposed zoning text amendment will do the following. It will amend section 9-5.128D12 and reduce the distance from schools from 1,800 to 930 feet. Staff provided a copy of the draft ordinance to the Planning Commission for review and consideration, which tonight would be a recommendation to the council for adoption at the next or at the impending city council meeting. In terms of general plan consistency related to the zoning text amendment, it is consistent with the general plan policies and implementation measures, including zoning consistency for commercial cannabis operations. The intent of the Coalinga cannabis regulations was to implement state laws as it relates to regulating cannabis and cannabis products. The proposed changes in regulations to reduce the distance from schools would not be contrary to state law and in fact still more stringent than state law. The ordinance amendment will reduce the distance cannabis facilities may be from schools as defined in state law within the manufacturing and business zoning designations. By reducing the distance requirement, it will open additional properties in town to accommodate non-retail cannabis operators, such as manufacturers, cultivators, distributors, testing labs, and micro businesses. With this change, it would open additional property on Elm Avenue, south of Pacific Street, where parcels are zoned MBL, including a parcel on the corner of Thompson and Polk Street. So those are primarily the properties that are impacted based on reducing the distance, because we don't have any other properties zoned MBL that are even within the 1,800 feet currently. Besides what's, by shrinking that distance, it really encumbers that additional block. All applications for cannabis operations at these new available locations will still be subject to the city's entitlement processes and regulatory permitting processes prior to authorized operational authority, including the issuance of a conditional use permit in order to analyze noise, odor, and traffic to ensure consistency with the planning and zoning regulations. This is especially critical since several of the properties in question are adjacent to residential districts where certain transitional standards will need to be applied to ensure the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding properties. Public notification was submitted on February 11th, 2021. Notices were mailed, posted, and emailed to the local paper in accordance with local state regulations. And in terms of environmental determination, this text amendment has been reviewed in accordance with CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, and staff has determined that the ordinance change would not have a detrimental effect to the health, safety, and welfare of the community and fall under the general rule exemption. In addition, CEQA would further be reviewed during the permitting process as the conditional use permit will be required for any cannabis operation. In terms of the fiscal impact, decreasing the distance from schools will expand the city's land availability for cannabis operations and increase revenue capabilities from taxes and licensing fees. In terms of reasons for recommendation, there are 4 findings that need to be met when looking at a zoning ordinance amendment. And one is that the proposed zoning ordinance amendment would not be detrimental to the public health, interests, safety, convenience, and welfare of the city. The proposed zoning ordinance amendment is consistent and compatible with the goals, policies, and actions of the general plan and other applicable provisions of the zoning ordinance. And if applicable, the site is physically suitable, including but not limited to access provisions of utilities, compatibility with adjoining land uses and absence of physical constraints for the requested zoning designation and anticipated land use and developments. And the last one is the proposed zoning ordinance amendment has been processed in accordance with the applicable provisions of the California Government Code and the California Environmental Quality Act. So with that, that's the report. And if the commission has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And then again, this is a public hearing, so if there are public comments, I'd be more than happy to answer any clarifying questions before you do so.
Okay. Does Commissioner Pruitt, do you have any questions? Okay. Commissioner Garza? Commissioner Helmer?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The one particular site that was mentioned, Thompson and Polk, what is that within 1,800 feet of?
So as the commission may recall, now in the general plan, there's a property on Merced Avenue where there's a large subdivision proposed right on the corner of Merced and Jane, that big open section between Sandalwood. There was a 12-acre school site proposed in the general plan as public facilities. And so that's why specifically in the ordinance, when the original ordinance was written or drafted, we were looking to isolate the cannabis operations to the Cody area Claremont facility locations up in the north part of town, the south part of town on West Elm, down by, across from the Caballo Club and that industrial area, and then the industrial park. And so the 1,800 feet really came into play because of, that was the distance basically to Lucille. So the intent was to provide access up to Lucille. And then also happens to be where, correct, I mean, I may be wrong, I'm trying to think back to 2016, but the 1,800 feet was either Lucille or it was limited to isolating those particular locations, because the original intent was to really push those areas out to those locations with a lot of unknowns, not knowing exactly how this industry was going to, fit within the community in terms of, a lot of the regulations that we put in place. And we've found over time that they really haven't provided any major threat or any kind of issue to the community. There's a lot of community members I know that don't even know they exist, like they are even operating. And so I think with the request, the goal was from the council was to limit that distance to, the 930 feet, which is basically, they said, Sean, we need it at Pacific Street. And so what that did is by reducing that, it did reduce around that location on Merced. And so it basically got outside of that buffer. So that property would be outside the buffer.
So, but there's nothing at this point, no facility that would be covered under this ordinance that is actually there. It's just the proposed one at Merced and Jane.
The school, yes. And so
Well,
it was
as far as the
specific, yeah, it was
school
put in
is,
the
right.
regulations
Right.
originally
So it's-
because they wanted to have it 1,800 feet from that, or 1,800 feet from that particular location. Now, it has been quite a few years since the city and the school have spoken, but that was an identified school location when they were looking to build, 800 homes in that master plan development. However, that project had been parceled out, not in sense of every subdivision for every lot, but the highway commercial, the multifamily development, and the school site and the park site were all parceled out individually, with the remaining land available would be for subdividing for homes. So that's kind of where we're at with that, where the developer would have to, if someone bought it, they would have to stick with those land uses or move them around.
So approval of this amendment would not affect any of our existing educational facilities here in town.
No. Ultimately, what it's doing is there wouldn't be. I can't quote me on the distance, but from the existing school site, I think I provided some exhibits to the council when this was originally being discussed, and there was nothing within probably I would say 3,000 feet from a school. Retail's different because the retail is 600 feet, so that's different, and it has more sensitive receptors, and I refer to sensitive receptors as certain types of public facilities, but there are certain sensitive receptors that still have to be distanced. Like retail has restrictions on distance from residential and schools and other types of sensitive receptors like daycares. So when we went through that whole exercise for the retail, we had that's why applicants were looking at specific locations, because they had to look at their boundary maps to find out if they can meet that criteria. For all other cannabis operations, it's basically only K through 12 kind of schools.
Okay. And then my other question is, why 930 feet?
Because the direction from the council was they wanted it at Pacific Street as the dividing factor.
Okay.
So I was tasked with that, so I had to come up with that number.
To me, it makes more sense.
So I used my public noticing mapping that I use, and basically found the line that gets me right on Pacific Street. And so 930 feet was that number. I was playing with it.
To me, for looking at just, policy in general, I mean, why not 900? That would accomplish the same thing, and it would be a much less interesting number.
I think the number was more of a geographical thing rather than trying to draw parameters in terms of where you want, like meets and bounds for boundaries, which you can do. You can create districts and stuff like that. I think that the goal was just to get it to Pacific Street and allow that extra row of parcels the ability to try to expand the industry because we're getting a lot of inquiries about it and we just don't have land. That was the council's direction. So that's what staff did.
Okay, I was just looking for future, you know, for in the future. This may apply to other areas besides that the council's looking at right now. And, you know, 900 just seems more like a reasonable number. I mean, not reasonable, but yeah, it seems like
Yeah.
a less questionable number, that's all. So, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Yes.
That would be south of not Pacific Street and nothing north of Pacific Street.
Nothing north of us. Yeah, it'd be south of
You're
Pacific
call-
Street.
you're talking
So what you
about-
do is you take the school and then you put a bubble around it.
Yep.
And any parcels within that bubble cannot be occupiable for cannabis operations. Everything outside of that can.
Okay.
So what it does is it just creates that bubble around those parcels.
So in other words, anything from Blue Valley, south of that or
Yes.
southwest would be
Mhm.
available.
And then there's some of the industrial land that's south of the future alignment of Lucille, if you can
Yes.
imagine that, in
Yeah.
that big open field over there.
Right.
I should,
Okay, Sean, I know you're not the finance person, but, or, you know, the chief of police, but how much crime has come in as a result of manufacturing business light cannabis businesses?
I'm not aware of anything. I defer to the chief of police to, quote on that. But as far as I know, we haven't seen any major upticks in criminal activity due to the cannabis industry here. We haven't had any major issues with enforcement actions or anything like that on any of the facilities. They're all in full compliance. And that is one reason why we currently are moving to quarterly inspections on the facilities because the compliance level is very good.
And you also have video camera access into them, right?
Yes,
Or
the police department has
does?
access to all of the facilities inside and out.
Okay, and then my next question is, do you know how much revenue cannabis has been bringing in per year?
I'd have to look at the budget on the numbers, but it's between taxes and licensing, it could be over $1 million. But I off the top of my head, I wasn't prepared to answer that question.
That's okay. I know, like I said, I led with, I know you're not the finance director. Thank you.
Vice Chair Jacobs.
Couple comments. I was reading and it says health, safety, and welfare, the community around it, but we're not considering property values here. Residential property values being stigmatized by having a thing like that. I was told that, if you go down Elm, you can smell it, the cannabis there. And so I drove down there today and you can. Not that it's a terrible smell or, I got one thought about it or another, but some people don't like that. And it's a concern that if I owned a house there and that smell started permeating, that might have a negative effect on values. So I don't see the city as being able to monitor or being on top of it like when we were told when it first came out, we had negative pressure, scrubbers and all that. And I don't know what's in place to do it, but we're proposing to put more of these in, and I don't see any oversight on it.
Well, there is a significant amount of oversight, and if there is any smell issues, that those should be reported to us so we can address those issues with the operators. So, no, we don't have major smell issues. When you go over to Next Green Wave, we don't have smell issues. So if there are some smell issues, it could, we'd have to look into it, contact our inspectors and make sure they're out there taking a look and making sure that they're cleaning their facilities. But when we do go through those facilities, they do have all the proper equipment that are required. I mean, these HVAC systems are pretty in-depth, and it may be a maintenance issue for them. And it is their requirement to make sure that they're adhering to those requirements.
Who is our inspectors for that?
We use a consultant to do the inspections. They're coming out quarterly. It's SCI Consulting. We've been under contract with them for about 4 years, and they do compliance checks on a quarterly basis now. So if they haven't been out there, they may not have been out there in the last couple months. So if there is any kind of issue, we urge people to identify those because we go through these conditional use permits and we have ongoing conversations with our operators if there are issues to fix those problems.
Does the city have plans on annexing any more property outside of town? I know we're pro cannabis, but it would seem like if we could run this industry a little farther away from the residential areas, it would just benefits
That's gonna be a council decision, and it's industry driven whether or not they want to annex property outside the city limits. I mean, that has to be development driven for annexations to occur. So we're not seeing that. There's land in the city, and this, like I said, this is something that's been council driven in terms of a policy being brought before the commission. But from my experience in working in permitting these facilities, that they're quiet operators, but if there are compliance issues, we will address them. So I mean, those are things that we just need to be aware of if there are issues. I don't go in those facilities all the time, so we rely on our inspectors and the reports that we're given in terms of those smell issues. If there's any compliance issues, but they pay taxes, they pay licensing fees on time, and so we're always monitoring those facilities. So if it is becoming an issue, it needs to be complaint driven, especially with having the lack of code enforcement right now, actually actively out driving around. You don't necessarily see that. So
yeah.
Do you know what other jurisdictions, for instance, Lemoore or Woodlake, what their limits are right now, what their distance requirements are?
I don't. No, we were kind of, I'd say, the pioneer early on in the process, and I think the city was pretty conservative with the distance because the distance has always been 600 feet for the state. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf. I haven't looked at the ordinances for Lemoore. My understanding is that we're probably more stringent than, even at the 930 feet, we're probably more stringent than most jurisdictions. Just thinking out loud, I think that we probably are. I know that 1,800 feet, we were pretty high. And then on our outdoor cultivation, we're a mile. So that's pretty stringent too. Mm-hmm. But we've been pretty strategic about, kind of making those moves in terms of those distance requirements, but that's kind of been the driver, from the council, kind of providing staff direction on kind of what they want to see. Okay. But yeah, I imagine most of them are probably using the 600-foot radius, unless they copied our ordinance and didn't realize it's 1,800.
Shannon, did you want to read that letter?
Yes, I actually have a few.
You want to open the public hearing?
Yes, the public hearing was opened at the beginning.
I apologize, Chairman.
Yes. So
we, the city did receive what appears to be petition sheets. Some of the pages have printed names, some include signatures, and others are incomplete. These pages hold no legal weight and are just considered communications. So the city is in receipt of several of those pages. And then I'll start with the first letter. It's from Kenneth and Angie Dow. Before the commission for consideration is to reduce the distance from schools for commercial cannabis business activities from 1,800 to 930 feet. Proposition 64, legalizing cannabis, was overwhelmingly approved by the voters in 2016. Over time, this industry was projected to generate millions of dollars in tax revenues. In 2017, the state of California established a minimum distance of 600 feet from a school for commercial cannabis business activities. The state applied the same methodology it used to determine the distance liquor stores had to be from schools. In 2020, the state assembly declined to take action on a bill that would override municipal bans where more than 50% of voters approved Proposition 64. Advocates expect that a similar bill will be reintroduced by early 2021. But until then, local control is integral into California law. California allowed every city in the state to take a position on whether to allow commercial cannabis. In 2018, the city of Coalinga, through the adopted ordinance number 804, took a position and provided comprehensive regulations for cannabis activities and the zoning district they could operate in. The city also expanded the state minimum distance of 600 feet from a school to 1,800 feet. Cities in nearby towns, inspired by Coalinga's example, have allowed limited operations with lower tax rates. The city council, recognizing Coalinga's cannabis tax rate was no longer competitive, cut the tax rate for cultivation and nurseries. This demonstrated that Coalinga was flexible and competitive. Now, as a result of the economic devastation caused by COVID-19 pandemic, California is bracing for a severe economic downturn. Throughout the state, many cities are rethinking their cannabis regulation. Cities are looking at cannabis and the tax revenue that it can generate in a whole new light. Although cannabis has failed to deliver the projected sales tax revenue, there is no other industry coming to Coalinga. The city needs to be flexible to remain competitive in the only industry that can generate revenue the city needs. The city of Coalinga has provided a means for regulating the commercial cannabis industry in a manner which balances the need to earn revenue while promoting the health, safety, and welfare of residents and businesses within the city of Coalinga. No industry is as regulated and taxed as cannabis. Even liquor isn't comparable. Reducing the distance from 1,800 feet to the state minimum of 600 feet will allow for economic opportunity, not just in sales tax revenue, but also in property taxes generated through the increased property values. The proposed decrease in the distance from a school to 930 feet is not based on any methodology or credible data. It was just a distance proposed for the benefit of a few properties. We recommend this commission's recommendation to the city council is to reduce the distance from a school for a commercial cannabis business activities to 600 feet. This distance is based on the state's methodology and credible data and not for the benefit of a few. By postponing the inevitable, other cities will get the investor and the revenue they will generate. Thank you, Kenneth and Angie Dow. The next one I have is from Shelley Ross, District 4. Dear Planning Commission and City Council members, my name is Shelley Ross. I have lived in Coalinga for nearly 35 years. Coalinga is such a sweet city and is home to me. I want you all to know that I appreciate your time and efforts and concern in our little town. I do not agree and adamantly do not want to have any more cannabis facilities / businesses to be approved in Coalinga. I definitely do not want to have the distance reduced between the schools and the facilities. Why on earth do you want them closer to our kids? I know the arguments for more cannabis. Money, they keep the businesses neat, and you can't even tell what is going on inside by their signage. I really don't care. We have 8 cannabis-type facilities, businesses already, and we just don't need more. Enough is enough. We have taken the time to get signatures from people who agree with us. Most of the people who I talked to had no idea that we had that many cannabis businesses. They were in disgust and agreed that we need to stop. I know it is hard to find businesses to open, but I am a firm believer that if we do what is right, God will favor us. We need to make our city more family-oriented with businesses and activities for our young people. Why would a family want to move to Coalinga, who is known for prisons and cannabis? I live in District 4 and vote to stop this nonsense. Don't go with the flow. Please stop taking us in this direction. Work is hard for our kids. Our city could bring in quite a bit of money if we beefed up the area where the new fields are and bring in tournaments. We are centrally located and in a desirable location. That would support the local vendors and businesses. I know that you are all smart and creative thinkers. I believe that you'll all come up with other plans for our town. Many are praying for wisdom and godly strategies and courage to do the right thing. Thank you, Shelley Ross. And Another one from Linda Boomer. Dear Planning Commission and City Council members, my name is Linda Boomer. I'm a retired teacher and longtime resident of Coalinga. I'm very concerned about the number of cannabis businesses that are already in our city and the prospect of having even more cannabis-related businesses come to our city. Right now, we have 8 cannabis businesses, and 2 of those are retail businesses in our downtown plaza area. A cannabis lounge across the street from the United Security Bank and just down from the cannabis store on the plaza will unfortunately be opening soon. Those 2 businesses are just a few blocks from our high school. Our schools are designated as drug-free. What kind of message are we sending our children? Currently, cannabis businesses are supposed to be at least 1,800 feet from any school in our town. Now you are considering cutting that distance almost in half, down to only 930 feet from the nearest school. This is a family-oriented town, and we don't need any more cannabis businesses, and certainly not any closer to schools than they already are in our plaza and on Highway 198. Also, it would be helpful to our citizens to know where large amounts of land have already been sold to cannabis growers and businesses that are inside or just outside of our city boundaries. If we want to attract families to move to Coalinga, this is not the direction we should be going. I know it is all about money, but please consider something other than continuing to bring in more cannabis businesses. Coalinga is home to many wonderful families, and we want more families to move here and call Coalinga their home. There must be other ways to bring in revenue to our community that would enhance and promote our town as a place that is family friendly. Thank you, Linda Boomer. And I have one other one that I know of, but I have misplaced it, so give me just a second. Here it is. This one is from Mary Jones. I am in favor of relaxing the buffer zone requirements for the city of Coalinga. At present, the distance is 3 times that which is required by the state of California. When it was initiated, little was known about cannabis business and its impact on our community. It has been proven that cannabis businesses which do not involve any sort of retail activities create no negative effect on our community. According to our police chief, Darren Blevins, there has been no increase in crime. In view of our collective desire as a community to offer more employment and broaden the tax base, it seems prudent and not detrimental in any real way to expand the area in which cannabis businesses are allowed. And that concludes what I have here, but it looks like we have a couple of hands raised.
Okay, I can't see everybody. Well, I see Curtis Elliott, if he wants to go ahead and speak first.
Okay,
Mr. Elliott,
yes.
go ahead.
I'm in a zone that's directly affected by this advancement or reduction of this compliance. I do have a couple of concerns. One is, you say that they're all in compliance and that there is no smell, but it only really takes one bad one. And if we've got somebody that's coming in quarterly to check this, I can have a smell for weeks or days. And like one commissioner said, that's going to affect my property value. It's going to affect my way of life. Another concern was, the reduction from 1,800 down to 930. If you're going to reduce it, you might as well make it all the way down to 600, because this is a very select number to benefit a few select buildings, which to me is pretty, if you're going to do it for these business owners, then why don't you do it for all business owners? And I'm not for reducing it at all. I think we've got them in good locations now. I don't agree with reducing it because that we can get, these few buildings built, it's just, I don't think, like I'm agreeing with some of the ones, to bring more cannabis in is not the answer. We need to look, and it's maybe not your job to do that, the council, to bring in other diversified means as like I said, we don't want to be known as a town that's got prisons and cannabis. Those aren't two positive things for a community. And just, I appreciate your time and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you. Brenda Thames, I believe we can go to her next.
Good evening, and thank you for taking my comment. I'm Dr. Brenda Timms, president at West Hills College, Coalinga, and I fully understand and support the city's need to generate revenue through expanded tax base and licensing fees. I also fully understand the zoning restrictions and differences between non-retail and retail. But as one of only 11 residential community colleges in the state, we are a destination college, and just want to continue to encourage the commission and the city to be strategic about the placement of both retail and non-retail cannabis establishments, because what I have to market to potential parents is the whole city as a destination. And so we want to continue to be strategic about how we can present that. And also you have to express support for the stance of my educational partners across the parking lot here with Coalinga Huron Unified School District. So thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else, Shannon? Okay, we have Mr. Vosberg at the top, and then we'll just go in order from there.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, first I wanted to thank you all for being up there tonight. I know it's a tough job. Believe me, I lived it for 4 years. I listened to the exact same complaints last time when this came around. And guess what? None of it came to fruition. I respect everyone's opinions, but how would this city look without police and fire? That's what they're missing. They're missing the point. This funds police and fire. This funds your public safety. I know people don't like to hear that, but guess what? In 6 councils, no one has had an idea that has brought this in like this. All we did was go deeper into debt. That's what we did. We went into debt. So everyone has an idea of what to do, but no one puts it into action. That's because people have tried to put them into action and they've failed. Cannabis is a revolving thing. It brings in money because of how it's worked and because of how the tax structure. The cannabis is a benefit to the community. It's a huge benefit. It's more of a benefit than it is a negativity. We've hardly seen any negative effects of cannabis. And addressing the smell, if we're going to ban smell, I'd like to ban the garlic because I'm tired of waking up and smelling that. I really am. I don't like garlic at all. And I don't feel like that it's fair that I have to wake up and smell that. But I do because it's money and because people are being employed. And another thing I don't like is affordable housing coming in across next to me. I don't like that either, but it's coming. People want to talk about traffic. You want to talk increase in crime. Those follow those areas. And it's coming right across the street from me. I'm actually right across the street from where these proposed new cannabis places are. And I'd agree. Just take it down to 600. Go for the state. Do that. I totally agree. I think that the reason for the 930 was to kind of lay it back just a little bit. The reason for the 1,800 feet, I know because I was on the council when we approved this, was because we did not know what this was going to do. So we took the time and we looked at it. I'm not on council anymore, but everyone can see it hasn't caused any issues. So it's prudent to go ahead and approve this. We've had no increases in crime. This has been stated by the chief multiple times. What we have seen is positive effects to the community, though. Let's first understand how this works. First, the product is grown locally, providing much needed jobs and deemed essential by the California government, as we see. That product is taxed at the cultivation level by the square foot. Next, the product is packaged and sent to distribution, where the city once again gets taxes from that product. More people are employed at the distribution centers. Lastly, the product leaves distribution, and if it's sold at the Coalinga dispensary, we get another 10% off of that, plus the 1% attributed to Measure J. So far, the city has been able to use the cannabis industry to completely pull the municipal fund out of a $4.1 million debt. Anybody that has a better plan that can execute, I suggest running for city council and doing it. Don't just talk about it, do it. Because you haven't done it. Not in 3 or 4 councils it's been done. We just rode into debt. So, this didn't happen overnight. This only happened after massive cuts were made to public safety, the safety and the city staff. And then it was brought in, someone said, hey, you guys should go with cannabis. We looked at all the cuts that happened that had nothing to do with cannabis, just had to do with the idea that things go up every single year and that we don't get more residents. So we weren't currently getting more residents. So our tax base was not going up. So because of that, we kept going down. Our revenue streams going down and our costs kept going up. So the council had to make decisions to make cuts, which they did. They did about 2-3 years too late. So we drove the city into debt. I didn't drive the city into debt. I was a part of fixing that debt. I was unfortunately a part of making those cuts, which was really hard. And I'm telling you, no one wants to make those cuts. But Measure J is only into effect for another 8 years. That's $1 million at least. So what are you going to do when Measure J expires? You're going to try and pass it again? So what I heard was people didn't trust the city with Measure J. People didn't want to pay taxes. Okay, so people don't want to pay taxes and people don't want the cannabis industry to pay taxes, but what they want is all the safety and security that comes with it. That's an interesting catch-22, and that doesn't work. Now, the reason that the city is opening, from what I understand, the reason the city would open up land would be because, guess what? That land that's sitting out there right now, it's already been turned over 2 to 3 times. Some of it's been turned over 2 to 3 times. Some of it's only been flipped once. But guess what happens once they flipped it? Now that land's sitting at unobtainable rates. And these, not all cannabis companies can have $30 million investment like Nectarine Wave did. So cannabis companies right now are looking to come to Coalinga. They're looking for pre-built structures that have access to power and water so that they can get going right now. There are companies that are willing to do this as we speak. They're talking about this in Coalinga. So this brings in more revenue. This allows to increase. Just last meeting, Darren asked for another officer. And I heard Atkinson said that he wanted to get up to, even more officers than that make our city safe. So if what we're saying is that our city is less safe with cannabis than hiring more police officers, hiring more fire. That doesn't even make sense. We've been more safe because of that. So the good news is that it's on the very edge of town. From Pacific on the left-hand side, facing 198, there's only 6 to 8 buildings. This can add significant employment and much needed revenue to the town. Now there is another building, it's the Key building, that's on the opposite end of town. But I highly doubt Key is going to sell their building to cannabis. In fact, I don't think all of the businesses that are already there are going to sell them to cannabis either. I think you may see 2 or 3. That doesn't affect the school district whatsoever. It doesn't affect the college whatsoever. We already have cannabis here. What affects them is public safety. If our town has no public safety and we have a huge crime rate, who's going to want to go to school here? Who's going to want to move here? Who's going to want to buy any of those houses? So I think that the idea that this is going to cause home prices to drop is wrong. What's going to happen is the price of houses are going to go up because we are going to be a safer community. So I would just like to say that I hope that the Planning Commission supports this idea that was set forth a long time ago with council, and to say that, you know what, let's stop the hysteria. Let's stop the marijuana hysteria. This is the same thing once again. We put it to the vote of the people. It barely passed, but it did pass, which means 51% of the people believe that this is a direction that they would like to go. And there was never any promises to keep anything 1 or 2 or anything like that. There wasn't promises. The promise was to grow the industry at a time that see fit that it would be safe for the community. And that's what I think that's happening right now. This doesn't have anything to do with town area. This doesn't have anything to do with the school districts. This has everything to do with 6 to 8 buildings. And if they made it 600 feet, it'd be even more buildings. And we could bring even more businesses in that would offer opportunity employment, would offer tax revenue, and would offer a safer community for our residents. And that's what you guys should do in line with what your city council wants for the majority. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving right along to Nicholas Elliott.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, my name is Nicholas Elliott. My family and I have local ties to the city through our properties located at the edge of town on Elm Street. This is part of the proposed expansion area that we're discussing this evening. As most of you have probably known, for several years now, our properties have been distressed and often vacant. The rent collected at these facilities sometimes doesn't even cover the property tax that we pay. I'm calling in tonight to let the Planning Commission know that we support the expansion and that we feel this is a much needed resource for Coalinga. We hope the Planning Commission sees the need to bring much needed jobs and tax revenue to the city. This expansion would add funds to the police and the fire department, making it a much safer community. We are located at the edge of town and in the MBL zone. I ask that you please adopt the resolution tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Moving right along to Federico.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I connecting or am I connected?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, I'm mute. Hello?
Yes.
Okay, hello?
Yes. We
Yeah, I'm just calling in because okay, perfect. Hello. Okay. Sorry, it's because I had to switch to a phone because my computer died out. I was just calling in because I don't agree with shortening the distance, and that's what this is all about, shortening the distance for more facilities to come in that are giving them the opportunity to come in to be able to, take up the space and bring business. I totally understand the whole business side of it and stuff, but this is actually about taking a stand against shortening the distance. Yes, you guys put it to a vote before that. A lot of people are realizing right now that there's 8 facilities that are already going, that are already in business. 8 facilities. And if it barely passed before, what do you
Okay, we will move right along to Scott.
Once again, this is Johnny Gerson, not Scott Yeager. I just would want to request that my public comments will be put into the public hearing section. I'm sorry, I went a little early, I guess, earlier. But I do want to, make sure that we do have the resolution tonight on our board meeting to oppose the reduction in the proximity of cannabis facilities to our schools.
Yes, it will be noted in tonight's public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess we can give Federico another try. Yes, he's back.
Okay, I'm gonna make this very fast. Hello?
Yes,
Am I
we
here?
can hear. Yes, much clearer.
All right, I'm gonna make this very fast and very clear. Basically, I don't agree with it because we shouldn't be shortening the distance. We're sending the wrong message. If you were right before about bringing in cannabis, and as you all have mentioned that you're right, it brings in revenue. That's okay. But if you were to put it to a vote again, and it barely passed before, it might lose this time. And all people are saying, they're not saying that you're wrong. What people are against is, you got to take a stand. You got to say no at some point. And maybe that point is right now. And and just because you were right before doesn't mean you completely ignore the people, because you have to work with us too. We live here too. We have our opinions as well. And mine specifically is, heck, I would even, I don't know if that placement right across from Fatty's where all the kids go and eat is the best place to put a marijuana facility anymore. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for your time. And I meant to get back to you in the comment section, Adam Atkinson, but I just haven't had the chance. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Shannon, did you receive anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, and I don't see anybody else wishing to speak, so we will go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Public hearing has been closed. Is there any need for any further discussion from any of the commissioners? No. Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion. Any motion?
I'm going to motion to approve this resolution. The fact that many of the community members had no idea that we had 8 businesses in town shows me that our regulations are working. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so Commissioner Pruitt made the motion to approve this resolution, sending it to the city council. Does the motion have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Garza made the second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pruitt,
Aye.
Commissioner Garza,
Aye.
Commissioner Helmer, Vice Chairman
Aye.
Jacob, Chairman Saylor,
No. Motion carries 4-1. Moving right along to, are there any potential action items?
No, Commissioner, and no Chairman, sorry.
Staff announcements?
I have none.
All righty then, Commissioner announcements?
And just to give update, we will not be having our next meeting.
Okay.
But we will, I think we've got some applications that are in the works that we'll probably be looking at in later part of March and April.
Perfect. All righty.
I have a question,
Yes.
not an announcement. When is the construction on Polk going to start?
Oh, it should start anytime. We're waiting on Caltrans traffic control plan. Caltrans has to approve the traffic control because they're
Even on the part that we're doing?
yes, because the limit lines are at the edge of the state highway. So they want their extra signage for approaching traffic. So we're hoping that will start in the next week or so. Sunset should be started at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. If no one else has any other comments, meeting adjourned.